The notification chimed at 7:14 p.m. on a mundane Thursday. I was standing in the kitchen of our Seattle townhouse, stirring a pot of marinara sauce, listening to the relentless Pacific Northwest rain drumming against the window glass. My husband, Liam, was in the shower. His iPad, which he usually kept locked in his home office, had been left on the kitchen island. When the screen lit up, I glanced over, expecting an email from his project manager or a notification from our shared Amazon account. Instead, I saw an iMessage preview. It was from my younger sister, Chloe. "I think I left my silver hoop in the passenger door pocket of your car. Check before she sees it. Last night was incredible. Miss you." I didn't drop the wooden spoon. I didn't gasp, and I didn't run up the stairs to bang on the bathroom door and demand an explanation. I just stood there, the smell of garlic and tomatoes suddenly turning my stomach as I stared at the glowing rectangle of glass. In those 10 seconds, my 3-year marriage and my 25-year relationship with my only sibling fractured into a million unrecognizable pieces. My name is Maya. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 5 years, I've worked as a data compliance auditor for a major tech firm in downtown Seattle. My entire job revolves around pattern recognition. I spend 40 hours a week looking at massive spreadsheets, searching for the one row of data that doesn't align, the one timestamp that contradicts the official log, the anomaly that proves someone is lying. I get paid to remove emotion from the equation and look strictly at the facts. I just never imagined I would need to audit my own life. I gently set the spoon down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and picked up the iPad. Liam had changed his passcode 3 months ago, claiming it was a new corporate security mandate, but people are rarely as clever as they think they are. I punched in the zip code of the beach town in Oregon where we had spent our honeymoon. Error. I tried his mother's birthday. Error. Then, my chest tightening with a sudden sick intuition, I typed in 0824, August 24th, Chloe's birthday. The screen unlocked. For the next 20 minutes, while the water ran upstairs, I didn't breathe. I scrolled through months of messages. I saw photos that made my blood run cold. I read inside jokes, complaints about my cooking, and detailed logistics of how they had managed to slip away during our family Thanksgiving dinner in Portland while I was downstairs baking a pie. My own sister, the girl who had stood next to me at the altar, holding my bouquet and dabbing her eyes with a tissue, had been sleeping with my husband for the better part of a year. By the time the shower turned off upstairs, I had forwarded the most damning screenshots to my own hidden email address and permanently deleted the outgoing mail logs. I placed the iPad back in the exact millimeter on the counter where I'd found it. When Liam came downstairs, smelling of sandalwood body wash and smiling perfectly, I handed him a plate of pasta. I looked him dead in the eye, and I didn't say a single word about it. My job had taught me the golden rule of investigation. The moment you confront a suspect with partial evidence, they start destroying the rest. You don't strike until the file is complete. Over the next 4 days, I became a ghost in my own marriage. I kissed Liam goodbye in the mornings. I answered Chloe's upbeat text messages about her new workout routine, and every night, when Liam thought I was asleep, I took my laptop into the spare bedroom and went to war. I pulled our joint bank statements and cross-referenced them with his Uber receipts. I found the mystery charges for a boutique hotel just 3 miles from Chloe's apartment. I pulled the cell phone records and matched the duration of their late-night calls to the exact nights Liam claimed he was working late at the office. I compiled it all. I built a timeline so bulletproof, so clinically irrefutable, that no amount of gaslighting could ever dismantle it. On Tuesday morning, I called out sick from work. I put on a tailored trench coat, ordered a lift, and went straight to the law offices of a high-end family attorney I had researched over the weekend. Sitting in a leather chair overlooking the gray expanse of the Puget Sound, I slid a perfectly organized indexed binder across the mahogany desk. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, flipped through the tabs. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of professional approval and quiet pity. You've made my job exceptionally easy, Maya. Are you sure you don't want to attempt counseling? It's a very severe betrayal. I don't counsel anomalies, I replied, my voice steady. I eliminate them. File it today. I didn't tell Liam in person. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry, or the opportunity to fall on his knees and beg to forgive me. I had the divorce papers served to him at his office the very next afternoon. Within minutes, my phone started detonating. Call after call from Liam, texts from Chloe, frantic and confused, playing the role of the concerned sister perfectly. I blocked them both. I packed a single suitcase, left my wedding ring resting on the center of his iPad in the kitchen island, and checked into an Airbnb on the other side of the city. I was done. I had executed the surgical removal of a toxic tumor from my life, and I fully believed the worst was behind me. I thought the story was over, but I was wrong. A week later, I was sitting in a dimly lit corner of a Starbucks near my temporary rental, nursing a black coffee and staring blankly at my laptop, when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up and felt the air completely leave my lungs. It was Eleanor, Liam's mother. Eleanor was a stoic, traditional New England woman who had relocated to Washington years ago. We had always maintained a polite, somewhat distant relationship. She wasn't the warm, cookie-baking type of mother-in-law. She was the type who noticed a smudge on a wine glass from across the room, but said nothing. She stood there, in a heavy wool coat, looking exhausted, her usually immaculate silver hair slightly windblown. Without asking, she pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. She didn't offer a greeting. She didn't apologize for his son. She just stared at me with eyes that looked dark and hollow, filled with a panic I had never seen in her before. "Maya," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Eleanor, if you're here to defend him or to ask me to talk to him, you're wasting my time. I know everything. I know about him and Chloe. It's done." Eleanor leaned forward across the small round table. She looked over her shoulder, as if afraid someone in the bustling coffee shop might be listening, before leaning in so close I could smell the peppermint of her breath. "No, Maya," she whispered, her voice dropping to a ragged, terrified frequency. "You know about the affair, but that's not why he married you." She reached into her purse with trembling fingers. "You don't know everything." I stared at Eleanor, the ambient chatter of the Starbucks fading into a distant hum. The espresso machine hissed somewhere behind me. A barista called out a name. None of it registered. My entire focus narrowed to the trembling woman sitting across from me and the worn manila envelope she was now pulling from her oversized leather purse. "What do you mean that's not why he married me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Eleanor, what are you talking about?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed the envelope flat on the table between us, her palm pressing down on it as if she were afraid it might fly away, or as if she was still deciding whether to let me see what was inside. "Before I show you this," she said, locking eyes with me, "I need you to understand something. What's in this envelope is going to change everything you think you know about your marriage, about Liam, about your family, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There's no going back to the version of reality you've been living in." "Eleanor," I said, slowly, "my husband has been sleeping with my sister for a year. I've already had my reality shattered. Whatever's in that envelope, I can handle it." She studied my face for a long moment, searching for something. Strength, perhaps? Or resolute? Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it, because she slowly lifted her hand and slid the envelope across the table toward me. "I'm sorry, Maya," she whispered, her voice dropping to a ragged, frightened frequency. "I'm deeply, profoundly sorry." I reached for the envelope, but Eleanor's hand remained firmly on top of it. "Before I show you this," she said, locking eyes with me, "I need you to understand something. What's in this envelope is going to change everything you think you know about your marriage, about Liam, about your family, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There's no going back to the version of reality you've been living in." "Eleanor," I said, slowly,
My husband has been sleeping with my sister for a year. I've already had my reality shattered. Whatever's in that envelope, I can handle it." She studied my face for a long moment, searching for something. Strength, perhaps? Or resolute? Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it, because she slowly lifted her hand and slid the envelope across the table toward me. "I'm sorry, Maya," she whispered, her voice dropping to a ragged, frightened frequency. "I'm deeply, profoundly sorry." I reached for the envelope, but Eleanor's hand remained firmly on top of it. "Before I show you this," she said, locking eyes with me, "I need you to understand something. What's in this envelope is going to change everything you think you know about your marriage, about Liam, about your family, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There's no going back to the version of reality you've been living in."
I stared at the name, trying to make it make sense. Olivia Grace Brennan. I had never heard that name before in my life. I didn't know anyone named Olivia. And yet, according to this document, she had been born on the exact same day, in the exact same hospital, to the exact same mother as me. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Who is Olivia?" Eleanor reached across the table and gently took my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Maya," she said carefully, "you were not your mother's only child born that day. You had a twin sister, an identical twin. Her name was Olivia." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the breath leave my body, felt the coffee shop spin around me for a dizzying moment before everything snapped back into sharp, painful focus. "That's impossible," I said automatically. "I would know. Someone would have told me. My mother, my father, Chloe. Someone would have said something in 28 years. "Your parents went to extraordinary lengths to ensure no one ever found out," Eleanor said. "They separated you and Olivia when you were less than a week old. Your mother kept you. Olivia was given to another family, a private adoption, arranged through a lawyer your father knew. No agencies involved, no official records that could be easily traced. As far as the world was concerned, Olivia Grace Brennan simply ceased to exist." "Why?" The word came out broken, almost pleading. "Why would they do that? Why would anyone separate newborn twins?" Eleanor's expression darkened. She pulled another document from the envelope, a handwritten letter on yellowed paper, the ink faded but still legible. "This is a letter your mother wrote to me. She sent it to me 8 years ago, not long before she passed. She was dying, Maya. Pancreatic cancer. She knew she didn't have much time left, and she was desperate to unburden herself of secrets she had kept for 20 years. I don't know why she chose me as her confessor. Perhaps because she knew our families had a connection, even then. Perhaps she simply needed to tell someone, anyone, and I was convenient." "A connection?" I repeated. "What connection? You and my mother barely knew each other." Eleanor's face crumpled slightly, a flash of guilt crossing her features before she composed herself. "Read the letter," she said. "It will explain more than I ever could." I unfolded the fragile paper with trembling fingers and began to read my mother's words from beyond the grave. "Dear Eleanor, I am writing to you because I am dying, and because there are things I have kept hidden for 20 years that will soon come to light whether I want them to or not. I have spent the last 2 decades living with the weight of decisions I made when I was barely more than a child myself, decisions that seemed rational at the time but have haunted me every single day since. When I found out I was pregnant at 19, I was terrified. Daniel and I were engaged, but we had no money, no stability, no plan for how we would raise even one child, let alone the 2 I was carrying.
When the doctor told me it was twins, I cried for 3 days straight. I loved those babies, both of them, from the moment I felt them move inside me. But I also knew, with a certainty that still makes me sick to my stomach, that I could not give them both the life they deserved. A lawyer Daniel knew through his work told us about a couple who were desperate for a child. They were wealthy, established, unable to conceive on their own. They were willing to pay handsomely for a private adoption, with no questions asked and no paper trail that could ever lead back to them or to us. The decision was made before the babies were even born. We would keep one twin and give the other to this couple. We told ourselves it was the right thing to do, that we were giving both children their best chance at a good life. We told ourselves the babies wouldn't remember each other, that they would never know what they had lost. We told ourselves so many lies, Eleanor. When the girls were born, I held them both for exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes with my 2 daughters in my arms, their tiny fingers wrapped around mine, their heartbeats synchronized in a rhythm that seemed to prove they were 2 halves of the same soul. And then the lawyer came, and I handed Olivia to a stranger, and I watched him carry her out of the hospital room while she screamed and screamed and screamed. I named her Olivia because it means olive tree, a symbol of peace. I prayed she would find peace in her new life, even though I knew I never would. The couple who adopted her changed her name immediately. They wanted no trace of her original identity, nothing that could connect her to the circumstances of her birth. They raised her as their own, and from what I understand, they gave her everything, every material comfort, every opportunity, every advantage that money could buy. But I have kept track of her, Eleanor. I have watched her from a distance her entire life. I have watched her graduate high school, go to college, start her career. I have watched her grow into a beautiful, intelligent, driven young woman. And 3 years ago, I watched her meet a young man named Liam, your son. I don't know how much your son knows, Eleanor. I don't know if he genuinely loves Chloe, or if he is simply a pawn in a larger game being played by people far more ruthless than he is. But I know that Chloe's father, the man who raised Olivia as his own, has been grooming Liam for years. I know that Chloe and Liam's relationship is not a coincidence, and I know that the $40 million trust is at the center of everything. There's one more thing you need to know, Eleanor. One final piece of the puzzle that will explain why I am writing to you specifically, rather than going directly to the authorities or to my daughters. I have another daughter, my firstborn, the twin I kept. Her name is Maya. Maya doesn't know about Olivia. She doesn't know she has a twin sister. She doesn't know that the young woman she believes is her half-sister, Chloe, is actually her twin sister's stepsister, connected to her by a web of lies and fraud that stretches back to the day she was born. And she doesn't know that the trust, the $40 million, has a secondary clause, a clause that Olivia's adoptive father discovered only recently, and which has set in motion a chain of events I am powerless to stop. The clause states that if the designated heir dies without children of her own, the trust will pass to any surviving biological siblings. Maya is Olivia's only biological sibling, which means if something happens to Olivia, Maya inherits everything. I'm telling you this, Eleanor, because I believe your son is involved in something dangerous. I don't know if he is a willing participant or an unwitting accomplice, but I know that Chloe's father, the man who raised Olivia as his own, has been asking questions about Maya, about her career, her relationships, her life. And I know that Liam's sudden interest in Maya, which began shortly after Chloe introduced them at a party 2 years ago, is not a coincidence. Please, Eleanor, watch over Maya, protect her from whatever is coming, and if anything happens to me before I can find the courage to tell her the truth, please give her this letter. She deserves to know who she really is. With deepest regret, Sandra Brennan. I set the letter down on the table. My hands were shaking so violently that the paper rattled against the wood. Everything I believed about my life, my family, my marriage, my identity was a lie. A carefully constructed, meticulously maintained lie that had been built before I was even born. I had a twin sister, Olivia, a sister I'd never met, never known existed, who was ripped away from me when we were days old and raised by strangers who used her as a pawn in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. And Liam, the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man I had just discovered he was cheating on me with Chloe, had not married me for love. He had married me for money, for a $40 million inheritance I didn't even know existed. Eleanor, I said slowly, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. When did you receive this letter? 8 years ago, Eleanor whispered, 3 months before your mother died. And you kept it secret for 8 years. You let Liam
The death certificate stared back at me from the table, its clinical black text against white paper somehow more terrifying than any horror movie I had ever watched. Olivia Grace Brennan. Date of death, 6 months ago. Cause of death, cardiac arrest due to undiagnosed congenital heart defect. A neat, clean, medically plausible death. The kind that raises no eyebrows, prompts no investigations, generates no uncomfortable questions. The kind of death that someone very careful would fabricate. I need to find her, I said, my voice sounding strange and metallic in my own ears. If this death certificate is fake, then Olivia might still be alive somewhere. She might be in danger. She might need help. Eleanor nodded slowly. But Maya, you need to understand what you're walking into. Chloe's father, the man who orchestrated all of this, his name is Richard Ashworth. He's not some small-time con artist. He's a hedge fund manager with connections in every industry imaginable. Legal, political, financial. He has friends in places that could make your life very difficult if you start asking the wrong questions. I don't care, I said, flatly. He used my sister as a pawn. He might have killed her. Or worse, he might be holding her somewhere. And my husband, I nearly choked on the word, was apparently part of this from the beginning. I gathered the documents from the table, carefully sliding them back into the manila envelope. My hands had stopped shaking. Something colder had taken over, a steely, calculated focus that felt almost foreign to me, yet perfectly natural at the same time. This was what I did. I found inconsistencies. I traced patterns. I built cases from fragments of data that other people overlooked. Except now the case wasn't about corporate fraud or data compliance. It was about my own life, my own blood, my own survival. Eleanor, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, I need to know everything you know about Richard Ashworth, where he lives, where he works, who his associates are. I need to know about Chloe, her real history, her relationship with Olivia, everything. And I need to know exactly how deep Liam is in this. Eleanor hesitated. Maya, maybe you should go to the police, let them handle. And tell them what? That my dead mother wrote a letter 8 years ago claiming my husband married me for an inheritance I didn't know about? That I have a twin sister who might or might not be dead? That my step-sister-in-law's father forged legal documents? I shook my head.
The police will think I'm having a mental breakdown, and by the time they take me seriously, if they ever do, whoever's behind this will have covered their tracks completely. I leaned forward. Eleanor, you kept this secret for 8 years. You owe me. Help me now. She was silent for a long moment, the weight of her guilt visible in every line of her face. Finally, she nodded. Richard Ashworth lives in a penthouse in downtown Portland. He runs his hedge fund from an office in the same building. He's been divorced twice. His first wife, Olivia's adoptive mother, died in a car accident when Olivia was 6. Her vehicle went off a cliff on the Pacific Coast Highway during a rainstorm. The official ruling was accidental death, but there were some inconsistencies in the police report that were never adequately explained. What kind of inconsistencies? Tire marks, or rather the lack of them. If Catherine had lost control of the vehicle, there should have been skid marks indicating she tried to brake or correct her steering. There were none. The car went over the edge in a perfectly straight line, as if it had been aimed deliberately. I felt a chill run down my spine. You're saying someone killed her? I'm saying the evidence is consistent with that possibility, but the investigation was closed within 2 weeks, and the lead detective retired 6 months later with a very good pension. Make what you will of that. He turned a page in the folder. After Catherine's death, Richard remarried quickly within 18 months. His new wife, Diana Mercer, had a daughter from a previous relationship, Chloe. The marriage lasted 9 years before Diana filed for divorce. The settlement was substantial, and she signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement as part of the terms. I've been trying to locate her for the past week, but she seems to have completely disappeared. New name, new location, no digital footprint whatsoever. Do you think Richard did something to her too? I think Richard Ashworth has a pattern of making inconvenient women disappear. His first wife, his second wife, and now, potentially, your sister. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk toward me. It showed a young woman with dark hair and familiar features, features that looked almost exactly like my own, but something slightly different in the set of the mouth, the angle of the cheekbones. This is the most recent photograph I could find of Olivia. It was taken 4 years ago at a charity gala hosted by the Ashworth Foundation. After this event, her public appearances became increasingly rare. By 3 years ago, she had stopped appearing altogether. I stared at my sister's face, drinking in every detail. She looked tired in the photo, I realized. Tired and something else. Haunted, maybe, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. What happened to her? I whispered. That's what I've been trying to determine. 3 years ago, Olivia abruptly resigned from her position at Ashworth Capital. No explanation was given publicly, but I managed to track down a former colleague who was willing to talk off the record. According to this source, Olivia had discovered something in the company's financial records, something that deeply disturbed her. She confronted her father about it, and there was a major falling out. She left the company the next day and moved out of the family home within a week. What did she discover? Marcus leaned back in his chair. This is where it gets complicated. My source didn't know the specifics, but they said it had something to do with the trust, the $40 million inheritance your mother mentioned in her letter. Olivia apparently found documentation proving that the trust had been obtained through fraudulent means and that her father had been systematically manipulating the terms for decades. The falsified birth certificate, I said. My mother wrote about that. That was part of it, Marcus agreed, but there was much more. Much more. According to my source, Olivia discovered that her father had been preparing for a specific contingency, a scenario in which Olivia died without children, triggering the trust clause that would pass the money to any surviving biological siblings. I felt my blood run cold. He knew about me. He knew about you from the very beginning, Marcus confirmed. Your mother's letter mentioned that he'd been asking questions about you for years. What she didn't know, what I only discovered last week, was that Richard Ashworth has maintained an extensive surveillance file on you since you were 18 years old.
He pulled out another folder, this one much thicker than the first, and opened it to reveal page after page of photographs, documents, and printed emails. Your college transcripts, your employment records, your medical history, your dating history, every apartment you've ever rented, every car you've ever bought, every significant relationship you've ever had. Marcus's voice was grim. Maya, this man has been watching you for a decade. He knows more about your life than you probably remember yourself. I flipped through the pages with numb fingers. There were photographs of me at my college graduation, at my first job interview, at restaurants and coffee shops and grocery stores. Photographs taken from a distance, without my knowledge, by someone who had been following me for years. And then I found the photographs from 3 years ago. Me at a party, laughing at something someone had said. Me on a date at a restaurant, looking across a candlelit table at a handsome man with brown hair and an easy smile. Liam. The meeting wasn't accidental, I said, my voice hollow. Liam didn't just happen to be at that party. He was sent there. I believe so, yes, Marcus said. Chloe introduced you, didn't she? I nodded slowly, remembering. It had been a company event, a mixer hosted by Chloe's PR firm, which had just landed a major tech client. I had gone as Chloe's +1, thinking it would be a fun night out with my sister. Chloe had introduced me to Liam, describing him as an old friend from business school who was totally single and definitely my type. I had been charmed, flattered, completely oblivious to the web being woven around me. Liam was recruited, I said. By Chloe, by Richard, I don't know exactly how, but they brought him in specifically to get close to me. That's my assessment as well, Marcus confirmed. The question is, for what purpose? Your mother's letter suggested they were positioning themselves to inherit the trust through you somehow, but the mechanics of that are still unclear. The inheritance clause, I said, thinking out loud. My mother said that if Olivia died without children, the money would pass to any surviving biological siblings. That's me, but I'm not part of the Ashworth family. I have no legal claim to that trust. You wouldn't under normal circumstances, Marcus agreed, but here's where it gets interesting. I've been reviewing the original trust documents. It took some doing, but I managed to obtain copies through certain channels. The language is very specific. The money passes to biological descendants of the original beneficiary or their direct blood relatives. The original beneficiary was Richard's grandfather. Richard is his grandson, and Olivia, as far as the fraudulent records show, is Richard's biological daughter. But she's not, I said. She's my biological sister. We share the same parents, neither of whom are related to Richard Ashworth. Exactly, Marcus said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. The entire foundation of Richard's claim to the trust is fraudulent. If it could be proven that Olivia was not his biological daughter, the trust would be invalidated entirely. The $40 million would revert to the estate and eventually be distributed according to default inheritance laws, which would likely mean distant relatives none of us have ever heard of. So Richard has every incentive to keep the truth hidden, I said slowly. And anyone who knows the truth, anyone who could expose him, is a threat. Olivia knew the truth, Marcus said. She discovered it 3 years ago. And 6 months ago, according to that death certificate Eleanor showed you, she officially died. But you said the death certificate is fake. I believe it is, Marcus confirmed. There's no corresponding death record in any county system I've searched. No funeral home has any record of handling her remains. No cemetery has any record of a burial or cremation. The document appears to have been created whole cloth and filed directly into the state's vital records system, which would require either extraordinary hacking skills or inside access. Or both, I muttered. Or both, Marcus agreed. Which brings us to the real question. If Olivia isn't actually dead, where is she? He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out one final document, a printout of what appeared to be a bank statement. This is an account registered to a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. The company has no apparent business operations and exists solely to hold this account. 5 months ago, 1 month after the fake death certificate was filed, a transfer was made to a small private healthcare facility in rural Idaho. The amount was substantial,
$50,000, paid monthly on an ongoing basis. A healthcare facility? Technically, yes. On paper, it's registered as a long-term care facility for patients with severe psychiatric conditions. Marcus's expression darkened. In practice, it's something closer to a private prison, the kind of place where wealthy families can make problematic relatives disappear without any legal oversight or public accountability. The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself. You think Olivia is there? You think Richard had her committed to this place, faked her death, locked her away where no one would ever find her? I think it's a strong possibility, Marcus said. I haven't been able to confirm it yet. The facility is extremely secretive. No visitor logs, no public records, no way to verify who's actually inside. But the timing of the payments, the connection to the Ashworth Shell Company, the coincidence of Olivia's death occurring exactly 1 month after the transfers began, it's too much to ignore. I stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. Then we need to go there. We need to find out if she's inside. It's not that simple, Marcus cautioned. The facility is private property. We can't just walk in and demand to see their patient roster. And if Richard has people on the inside, security, administrators, staff who are loyal to him, they'll alert him the moment anyone starts asking questions. Then we don't ask questions, I said. We find another way in. Marcus studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You're serious about this? My sister might be locked in a psychiatric prison while the people who put her there are systematically dismantling my life and positioning themselves to steal a fortune that belongs to neither of us, I said flatly. Yes, Marcus, I am very serious about this. He nodded slowly, then reached into his desk and pulled out a map of Idaho, spreading it across the surface of the desk. The facility is called Pinehurst Wellness Center, he said, pointing to a small dot in a remote corner of the state. It's about 40 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by private forest land owned by yet another Ashworth Shell Company. The only road in is gated and monitored. There's a perimeter fence with motion sensors, and I'm told they have security staff on site around the clock. You're making it sound impossible. I'm making it sound difficult, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. I've been doing this work long enough to know that every secure facility has vulnerabilities. The question is finding them and being willing to exploit them. He looked at me directly. I can help you get inside, Maya, but I need you to understand what you're risking. If we're caught, it won't just be trespassing charges. Catherine Ashworth's car went over a cliff with no skid marks. Diana Ashworth signed an NDA and vanished from the face of the earth. Olivia Ashworth discovered her father's secrets and ended up in a psychiatric facility with a fake death certificate filed in her name. He leaned forward. Richard Ashworth has $40 million in incentive to keep his secrets buried, and he's demonstrated repeatedly that he's willing to destroy anyone who threatens to expose them. If you go down this road, Maya, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he'll try to destroy you, too. I thought about Liam, sitting in our Seattle townhouse, probably wondering where I had gone. I thought about Chloe, sending me cheerful text messages about her workout routine while secretly sleeping with my husband and conspiring to steal my inheritance. And I thought about my mother, carrying this terrible secret to her grave, and about Eleanor, keeping it buried for 8 more years out of misguided love for her son. And I thought about Olivia, my twin, my blood, the sister I had never known, who had been taken from me before I could even form a memory of her face. She had spent her entire life as a pawn in someone else's game, used by her adoptive father, manipulated by her stepsister, discarded the moment she became inconvenient, and now she might be locked in a facility in the middle of nowhere, abandoned and forgotten, while the people who had imprisoned her moved on with their lives as if she had never existed. I wasn't going to let that stand, I said quietly. Tell me how to get inside. Whatever it takes, Marcus. I'm going to find my sister. The drive to Idaho took 11 hours. Marcus and I left Portland at 3 a.m., taking back roads whenever possible, paying for gas with cash, keeping our phones powered off and stored in a signal-blocking pouch Marcus kept in his glove compartment. Paranoid precautions, maybe, but paranoia had kept Marcus alive for 23 years in a profession where carelessness could get you killed, and I was in no position to argue with his methods. We drove through the night in near silence, the headlights cutting through darkness so complete that it felt like the rest of the world had simply ceased to exist. I watched the landscape change out my window, the lush green of the Pacific Northwest gradually giving way to the dry, sparse terrain of central Idaho, where the towns grew smaller and further apart until they disappeared altogether, replaced by endless stretches of pine forest and empty highway. Marcus had spent the previous 48 hours preparing for this. He had obtained a set of credentials identifying me as a state health inspector conducting a routine compliance audit, credentials that were convincing enough to survive a casual glance, though they wouldn't hold up under serious scrutiny. The plan was simple. I would enter the facility through the front door, using the fake credentials to gain access to the patient areas. Marcus would remain outside in the car.
"We're very proud of our facility," he said, in a tone that suggested he had rehearsed this speech many times. "We provide comprehensive care for patients with severe psychiatric conditions, individuals who require a structured, secure environment for their own safety and the safety of others." "How many patients do you currently have?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. 37, he said, "all long-term residents. Many of them have been with us for years. We provide a level of individualized care that larger institutions simply can't match." "I'll need to see the full roster," I said. "Names, admission dates, diagnoses, treatment plans, standard compliance documentation." A flicker of something, anxiety maybe, or calculation, crossed his face. "Of course, I'll have our records department prepare that for you. It may take a few minutes." "I'll wait," I said. He led me to a small conference room and left me there, closing the door behind him. I sat down at the table and waited, my heart hammering beneath my blazer, counting the minutes. 7 minutes passed before the door opened again, but it wasn't Dr. Hartman who entered. It was a young woman in scrubs, early 20s, with short cropped hair and nervous eyes that darted toward the door as if checking whether anyone had followed her. "You are the inspector?" she whispered. "Yes," I said carefully. She glanced at the door again, then moved closer, dropping her voice even further. "My name is Jess. I'm a nursing aide here. I've been working at Pinehurst for 8 months, and She stopped, swallowing hard. "There are things happening in this facility that aren't right. Things I've reported to Dr. Hartman and been told to forget about." My pulse quickened. What kind of things? Patients being medicated against their will. Patients whose families don't even know they're here. People who were admitted not because they're mentally ill, but because someone paid to have them locked away. Her voice cracked. "There's a woman in Ward C who's been here for 6 months. She's not sick. I've spent enough time with her to know that. She's scared and she's angry, and she keeps telling anyone who will listen that she doesn't belong here, that someone is keeping her prisoner." My blood was roaring in my ears. "What's her name?" Jess hesitated, glancing at the door one more time. "Her file says her name is Jane Doe. That's what they call her, Jane. No last name, no admission records that I've ever been able to find. She just appeared one day and we were told not to ask questions." "Can you take me to her?" "If Dr. Hartman finds out." "He won't, not from me. I'm a state inspector. Anything you show me is protected under whistleblower statutes. You won't face retaliation." It wasn't entirely true. My credentials were fake, and I had no authority to protect anyone. But Jess didn't know that, and the desperation in her eyes told me she had been waiting for someone, anyone, to take her seriously for months. "Follow me," she said, quickly. She led me through a maze of corridors, each one more sterile and depressing than the last, until we reached a locked door marked Ward C, Restricted Access. Jess swiped her badge, and the door clicked open. The ward was dim, lit by buzzing fluorescent panels that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. There were 6 rooms on either side of the hallway, each with a small window in the door. Most of the rooms appeared empty, but at the far end of the corridor, behind the last door on the right, a light was on.
Jess stopped outside the door. She whispered, "She's in here. I'll keep watch. You have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices we're gone." I looked through the small window. Inside, a woman was sitting on the edge of a narrow bed, staring at the wall opposite her with the hollow, exhausted expression of someone who has stopped expecting anything good to happen. She was thin, too thin, with dark hair that hung loose around her shoulders and shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of months without proper sleep. And her face, even through the distortion of the small, scratched window, was unmistakably, heartbreakingly familiar. I pressed my badge against the door lock. It clicked open. Her head snapped toward me, her body tensing with the reflexive wariness of someone who had learned to expect cruelty from every person who walked through that door. I stepped inside, letting the door close behind me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stared at me, her eyes widening slowly as she took in my features, my hair, my jawline, the shape of my mouth. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice rough and unused. I knelt down in front of her, bringing my face level with hers, close enough that she could see every detail, every freckle, every line, every unmistakable similarity between us. "My name is Maya," I said softly. "Maya Brennan. I was born on June 3rd, 1996, in Portland, Oregon. I weighed 6 pounds and 4 ounces. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled over immediately, running down her hollow cheeks in silent streams. "You weighed 5 pounds and 11 ounces, I continued, my own voice breaking now too. "And our mother held us both for exactly 1 hour before they took you away." "Olivia?" she whispered. Not a question, a confirmation. "I know," I said. "I know everything, and I'm here to take you home." She broke then, completely, thoroughly, in the way that only someone who has been holding themselves together through sheer willpower for months can break when they finally realize they don't have to be strong anymore. She fell forward into my arms, and I caught her, feeling her sister for the first time in 28 years, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, feeling something inside me that had been fractured and incomplete for my entire life suddenly, impossibly click into place. "We don't have much time," I said gently, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "Can you walk?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can run if I have to." I almost smiled. Same blood. Jess was waiting in the corridor, her face pale with anxiety. "We need to move," she said. "Dr. Hartman just called the front desk asking where you went." We moved quickly through the corridors, Olivia leaning on my arm, her body weakened by months of confinement, but her spirit burning with a fierce, desperate energy that propelled her forward. Jess led us through a service exit at the back of the building, a door used by maintenance staff that bypassed the main reception area entirely. The Idaho sun hit our faces as we stepped outside, and Olivia stopped for a moment, closing her eyes and tilting her face toward the sky, breathing in the fresh air like someone who had forgotten what freedom tasted like. "This way," I said, guiding her toward the tree line. "We have a car waiting." We made it to Marcus's vehicle in under 4 minutes. He was already behind the wheel, engine running, his expression grim but focused. He didn't ask questions when he saw Olivia. He simply unlocked the back door and said, "Get in, now." We were on the highway within 2 minutes, the gravel road and the razor wire fence disappearing behind us. Olivia sat in the back seat beside me, gripping my hand so tightly her knuckles were white, staring out the window at the passing landscape as if she were seeing the world for the first time. Marcus drove in silence for 30 miles before he finally spoke. "We need to get to the FBI field office in Boise. I have a contact there, Agent Patricia Delgado. She specializes in financial crimes and elder abuse cases involving private care facilities. I've already sent her a preliminary briefing on Ashworth. When she sees Olivia and hears her testimony, combined with the financial evidence and the forged death certificate, she'll have more than enough to open a federal investigation." "And Liam?" I asked quietly. "And Chloe?" "They'll be swept up in it," Marcus said. The email Eleanor found, the one from Chloe to Liam discussing the inheritance, constitutes evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Combined with everything else, they're looking at serious federal charges. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of everything, the betrayal, the lies, the years of manipulation settle into something quieter, something almost peaceful. Not forgiveness, maybe not ever, but a kind of clarity that comes when you finally see the complete picture after years of looking at fragments. Olivia spoke for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. Her voice was stronger now, steadier, the voice of someone reclaiming herself, one word at a time. "He told me no one was looking for me," she said softly. "Richard. He visited once, about a month after they put me in there. He stood in the doorway and told me that I had been declared dead, that no one knew I existed anymore, and that I should accept my situation and stop making trouble." She paused. "He said my biological family, my real family, wouldn't care even if they knew." I squeezed her hand harder. "He was wrong." "I know that now," she said, and something in her eyes, something broken and beautiful, flickered back to life. The federal investigation moved faster than any of us expected. Agent Delgado was everything Marcus had promised, sharp, relentless, and deeply personally offended by the scope of Richard Ashworth's crimes. Within 72 hours of our arrival in Boise, she had obtained warrants for Richard's financial records, Pinehurst's patient files, and the communications between Liam and Chloe. Richard Ashworth was arrested at his Portland penthouse on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week, I noted with grim satisfaction, that my world had first begun to unravel. Chloe was arrested that same afternoon at her apartment.